guys, so November is almost upon us and we know what that means on BookTube. It's non-fiction November. I'm very excited. So I was considering like going online and ordering loads of books I wanted from the library and to buy them, and then I was like, hold up, you definitely have a significant amount of unread non-fiction on your shelves and this is your opportunity to get through a lot of them. So I pulled them all off the shelves and I have 27, and I thought what I would do is, because I'm never going to be able to read 27 books in a month, like let alone if they were all novels, but particularly I'll be unable to do that because they're non-fiction and I read non-fiction much slower. I thought I would do a video showing you all of them, so you're probably going to be here a while, and I would hope that you guys can like let me know which ones you really enjoyed and you think I should prioritise, which ones you thought were rubbish and not worth my time, and also which ones you haven't read but really like the sound of and would like to see me like review / talk about. So what I'm doing is I keep all my unread books separate and I keep them in 2 locations. This bookcase behind me is all of my unread books I owned prior to 2020. If you would like to see all of those books, I did a tour of this bookcase a month or so ago for my $1 patron, so I'll link my Patreon down below, I always do. And then I have a book trolley over there, which is all of my unread books from this year. My long-term life goal, it was my goal for this year, then shit happened, is to get all of my unread books to fit on the book trolley. We all have to dream. So I will go through them in order of the ones I've had the longest to the most recent books that I've acquired, can't even talk, and I will also let you know when we're into like this year's books. They're actually pretty evenly split. I think I've got like maybe 14 from pre-2020 and then like 13 from this year, and I think that's mainly because I read way more non-fiction now than I ever did, and so I acquire much more non-fiction than I ever did. So yeah, so let's just crack on. And these first 4 are all blue, which is just a happy coincidence but is making me feel wonderful. So the first one is Beyond the Pale, Folklore, Family and the Mystery of Our Hidden Genes by Emily Urquhart. So I picked this up because I heard Jane Campbell rave about it, as many of us probably did, and I heard her talk with the author on her podcast, and I absolutely loved that podcast episode. I thought it was fascinating. You know when you listen to an audiobook or a podcast and it's so good that you'll forever remember where you were in that moment? So I was on the bus home from work and it was a really autumnal day, and I remember looking at this like sort of gothic house with a little turret, and there was all these autumn leaves and they were talking about fairy tales and I was just loving it. So this is about the fact that Emily's daughter was born with albinism, and it led Emily to do lots of research into her daughter's, I don't want to like mistalk, it's a rare genetic disorder. I never know whether to call things like condition. I guess I'll learn from reading the book, fingers crossed. Hopefully it's one of the first things I'll learn. So she did lots of research into it, but also I think prior to having her daughter, her area of education and study was fairy tales, so she sort of ties a lot of that research into folklore to do with albinism and the way people with albinism have been used in stories throughout history. So I actually started this one when I listened to the podcast, and I was really loving it. Don't know why I put it down, so definitely looking forward to getting back to that one. The next one is The Last Act of Love by Cathy Rentzenbrink. I have no excuse for this, it's so short. It's like 240 pages and it's just quite a little book. This is a memoir. Cathy's brother was in a car accident when he was 16 and he couldn't talk or walk for the rest of his life, and he sadly died 8 years after the accident. And it's about Cathy's relationship with her brother and the loss of him, and I've heard it's absolutely devastating but beautifully written. And again, I've heard the author talk in podcasts. I love the way she speaks. I think she has a newer book out, so I'm really behind the times with this one. These next 2, Jen bought me both of these at like various points through the years, and I need to still read both of them. This first one is Wasted, Coming Back from an Addiction to Starvation by Marya Hornbacher. I actually got about a third of the way through this when Jen first got me it, and I was absolutely loving it. So obviously it's a really hard read. It's a memoir about her anorexia and I think bulimia as well. But it's really lyrically written. It's incredibly beautiful. She had a very from memory, her upbringing was very wealthy but very distant and quite cold, so it's quite difficult to read about. And I put this down simply because I was reading too many books at once, and I didn't carry on because when that happens, it's usually the non-fiction that doesn't make the cut. Not so much recently, but back then it was. So I know I love this one, and I know it's highly likely to be a 5-star read because it was so beautifully written, so I need to get back to it. And this next one, I got this for Christmas one year from Jen, and as soon as I unwrapped it, I'd never heard of it, I was like, oh my god, this is the perfect book for me, I have to read it, and I still haven't. And I think it's because it's a little bit big and it's a proper non-fiction book, so it just intimidates me a tad. So it says the author exposes the mechanisms of control that pervade our lives and the myths on which they depend, exploring the lottery of our birth, the coercive influence of concentrated wealth, and the consent manufacturing realities of undemocratic power. Martinez shows that our faith in free media, free markets, free elections, and free will is dangerously misplaced. This is a profoundly hopeful manifesto which makes a dazzling case for creating freedom on our own terms. So I don't know if I even said what it was called. This is called Creating Freedom, Power, Control and the Fight for Our Future by Raoul Martinez. If I did say it, I've said it twice for you, there you go. So I'm sure I'm going to love that book, I have no excuse for having not read it. This next one, I remember Granta sent me this, and I've read a previous book by this author called The Mother of All Questions. This is an essay collection called Whose Story Is This? Old Conflicts, New Chapters by Rebecca Solnit. I'd really like to read all of Rebecca Solnit's books. She has a memoir that recently came out, which again, I love the sound of and I've had rave reviews, so I need to get to that one. I'm going to stop saying that, but I say I'm going to stop saying that, I probably will continue to say it. This next one is Doctrine? I never really know how you say that word. Essays for Dissenting Adults by Laurie Penny. I think I'm going to really enjoy this. I browsed through this when I saw it in the bookshop and I really loved her tone, so yeah, don't know why I haven't got through it yet. I think it'll be quite a quick read. This next one I'm actually going to read this month because if you don't know, or if you don't live in the UK, it is Black History Month this month in the UK, and so I'm trying to read quite a lot of books by Black British writers. I have a few novels on the go. I want to make sure I get to some non-fiction as well. And I don't know why I haven't read this. Like, I got it the moment it came out and I read the first chapter and loved it. Actually, I do know why I haven't read this, and it's because I don't really love the way this has been published. It's got a really hard spine, it's very tightly bound, and so whenever I picked it up I felt like not into it because it's not very comfortable, but I just need to get over it. So this is British on Race, Identity and Belonging by Afua Hirsch, and this is a blend of memoir and non-fiction. So each chapter she focuses on a different topic, like origins, heritage, places, and then whilst looking into those topics she also tells you about her own life. And she has a really brilliant voice, so I really need to get back to that one. And then I got both of these in the same book haul as British and haven't read either of them yet. This is Trace, Memory, History, Race and the American Landscape by Lauret Savoy. I love non-fiction books that blend geography with any discussion, like literally any discussion. If you blend geography or like an exploration of, my phone just went off, or an exploration of place with that discussion, I'm almost guaranteed to love it. So again, I think the only reason I've not picked this one up sooner is because when I actually flicked through and it arrived, it looks fairly academic, and so it scared me a little bit, but that's no excuse. This next one I should have read way sooner, but now sadly is as good a time as any to read it, and that is When They Call You a Terrorist, a Black Lives Matter memoir. This is written by Patrisse Khan-Cullors and Asha Bandele, and I haven't read it. I've heard amazing things about it. It has phenomenally high ratings on Goodreads. I obviously need to get to it. And then I have a couple more memoirs, and I'm getting like, I feel like I got all these books in 2019, so I'm getting much better. This is Another Planet, A Teenager in Suburbia by Tracey Thorn. I heard Simon over at Savage Read talk about this one and he really loved the sound of it. And to be honest, it's a bit embarrassing because I think Tracey Thorn is, yeah, she's a singer-songwriter, best known for her 17 years in best-selling duo Everything But the Girl. I've heard of them, but I couldn't tell you any of their songs, although I'm sure if I heard them I'd recognise them. But I just really like the sound of her story. It says, in a 1970s commuter town, Tracey Thorn's teenage life was forged from what failed to happen. Her diaries were packed with entries about not buying things, not going to the disco, and the school coach not arriving. And it says, it takes us beyond the bus shelters, car parks, utopian cul-de-sacs, weekly discos, to the parents who wanted so much for their children, the children who wanted none of it. It reconsiders the green belt post-war dream so many artists have mocked and yet so many artists have come from. And I'm not going to lie, why wouldn't you want a book with this cover? It's phenomenal. So that's the main reason I have it. This next one I actually did start reading earlier this year for Springathon. And I think I only got about 2 chapters in and then decided to put it down because I was just running out of time. And that is The Stopping Places, A Journey Through Gypsy Britain by Damian. This is obviously a beautiful book. And there's a very wonderful photo of the author on the back as well, which is, I always like when they do this, put like a full page photo. I was unsure when I started this. So Damian does what it says on the front. He traces back to the roads his family would have travelled throughout history, and he like tries to connect with these places. His story is quite unique in that he grew up surrounded by gypsy history, but his experience was limited in contemporary times. And from memory of the little bit I read, I think his parents decided to send him off to like boarding school or something, so he felt quite separate from his heritage, hence why he decided to go look into it. And I started it and I just wasn't sure if I really liked his voice, so I didn't dislike it enough to get rid of it. And to be honest, I'd read a few books of Springathon which I'd really disliked, so I could sense I was just in a mood with non-fiction at that time. So I decided to keep it, and I'm gonna try and give it another go. But do let me know if you've read this one and what your thoughts were, because I'd really like to know. Then I have an advanced reader's copy of It's Not About the Burqa, edited by Mariam Khan. The subheading is Muslim Woman on Faith, Feminism, Sexuality and Race. And the reason I haven't got to this is because, as with short story collections that are anthologies and with essay collections which are anthologies, I know I'm not going to love it, because there is no way you are going to love, if you're given 10 or 15 voices, you're just not going to love them all, because we all have different tastes in reading. And so I always know that I'm going to have to sort of slog through a few of them at least. But I also know that you can find loads of voices that you do love, and then they will have other books out that you can read. But it just always puts me off. Like, I find that, yeah, be they short story collections or essay collections, if they're anthologies, I always take longer to get to them. So convince me to pick this one up. It has amazing ratings on Goodreads again, so. This next one is another one I should read this month, but it has quite low ratings on Goodreads, which I didn't realise before I bought it, and it put me off, so do let me know. This is The Witch, A History of Fear from Ancient Times to the Present by Ronald Hutton. Now, I'm scared of it because it's only around 300 pages actually. It looks a lot bigger, but it's pretty small font and like really freaking crammed in on the page. I think this is quite academic, and I get the sense that it's going to be quite dry, and I've read a couple of books like that, but not many, and I think that's probably why it's got low ratings. I think a lot of people picked it up thinking it was maybe going to be like a popular history book, and maybe it's not quite. Maybe it's a little bit more academic in tone, hence the low ratings. But yeah, I'm still really interested in the topic, and I really want to read a history of this topic, but I just don't want it to be, like so many of them just have really low ratings. So yeah, have you read this? If so, what did you think? Was it really hard to read, or was it enjoyable? And these last two I was sent like at the end of 2019 from Greystone Publishing, who I think are based in Canada. This is Strangers in the House, A Prairie Story of Bigotry and Belonging by Candace Savage. So I think she starts to look into who the first occupants of her charming character home were, and then she finds loads of quite racist history to do with her house, and so she does all this research and relays that story. So yeah, I think that sounds pretty interesting. And this last one is a memoir, Every Little Scrap and Wonder, A Small Town Childhood by Carla Funk. A Small Town Childhood just brings me in, It says she grew up in a place of logging trucks and God, of pellet guns and parables. So yeah, I like the sound of this one. And I love memoirs. They're like my favourite type of non-fiction. So yeah, so those are all the ones I have that I've had before the start of 2020. So let me know if you've read them and what you thought of them and if you think I should read them. Then I would say quite a lot of the ones from this year have like similar themes. A lot of them are memoirs and quite a few of them are written by Indigenous writers. So this first one isn't, but quite a few of them are. So this is Out of Egypt by André. I haven't read any of his novels. His most famous one is Call Me By Your Name. But I read an essay he wrote in a collection, What My Mother and I Don't Talk About, and I really liked his writing style, and I was fascinated by his relationship with his mother, and I heard he had a memoir out, and I thought, we're going to hear more about his mother and about his life. I definitely want to read that, so I picked it up. And then we have the much celebrated In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I think I'm going to love this book. Everybody loves this book. I will 100% read this in November, although I want to say this about loads of these books. So yeah, but I think I'm going to love this one. I also have found it on audio, so I may listen to it on audio whilst reading it, because I saw her do an interview and she read a section and it was just beautifully read, so I'd quite like to hear her read it herself. The same with this next one. I also have this on audio because I really like the author when she talks in interviews. This is Thick and Other Essays by Tracey McMillan McCotton. This is a collection of essays which look at the intersection of race and feminism, and she's so intelligent. I've seen her in loads of interviews, and she's really good friends with Roxane Gay, and then they're in an interview where they interview one another, which I'll try and find and link below. They're both so hilarious, so intelligent, so outspoken, and it's just an excellent interview to watch. So yeah, just really want to read this one. I actually started reading this earlier in the year, and I read the first essay, I think, and then I realised that it was on audio, so I put it down in order to read it alongside the audio, and I just haven't got to it yet. So I really need to do that. Then we have an essay collection, and this is an anthology, and this is Growing Up Aboriginal in Australia, edited by Anita Hess. And I actually started this in, was it April? Was it April where we did reading Australian books? I can't remember. I started it and I read the first couple and I didn't love them, and it put me off reading the rest. And this has loads of essays and they're all quite short. And then I found this on Scribd in audio, so I think this is another one that I may try in audio, because I think they've got a lot of the authors reading their own essays. And again, it could have just been that the first two didn't connect with me, but a lot of the others will. They're both very short, and I'm someone who just prefers the longer length essay. Then we have a chunky book, and this is The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee, Native America from 1890 to the Present by David Truer. This came out late 2019 in the US, and it came out early 2020 in the UK. And I have to read this. I really want to know more about this topic. I have read a couple of books that focus on this topic, in particular in Canada, but not in the US, although I don't know if this focuses on the whole of North America. We'll find out. And I've heard amazing things about this one, and I definitely want to get to it next month. It is chunky. It is around 400 pages, but it's been published really well in the UK, so it's actually quite light to hold. And it is also in Digiphon in November, which is being hosted by Brodie and Michelle. I'll link both their channels and the announcement videos down below. I'm 100% going to participate, and so I'm going to be doing non-fiction November and also in Digiphon, where I'll read a combination of fiction and non-fiction, and I'll put up a TBR for that closer to the time, but I'll definitely be including this one. I've heard amazing things, have to read it. And then we have Seven Fallen Feathers, Racism, Death and Hard Truths in the Northern City by Tanya Talaga. I've heard amazing things about all of her books. I know this is going to be absolutely fucking horrendous and a really hard read, but I really want to know more and understand more about the police brutality towards Indigenous people in North America. And to start, I've heard really great things about this book, and I also love the sound of her more recent books. And I read the first few pages of this, and I think I'm really going to get on board with her writing style. So yeah, very interested in that one. I wouldn't say looking forward to. And then I have a couple of memoirs again. I love memoirs, I think I've mentioned. This is From the Ashes, My Story of Being Matey, Homeless and Finding My Way by Jessie Thistle. This is another amazing Canadian memoir that I heard lots of Canadian booktubers rave about, and I just thought it sounded brilliant, and so I decided to pick it up. And again, I found this one on audio, so I may listen as I read along. And then this next book is really like beautifully published. It's like a really dinky book, and I think more books should be published like this. And this is In My Own Moccasins, a memoir of resilience by Helen Nod. I'm going to read you a little bit from the back. The story goes dark and then darker. We live in an era where Indigenous women routinely go missing, are youth for kills and disposed of like trash, and the road to justice doesn't seem to run through the res. Nott's journey is familiar, filled with the fallout of residential school, racial injustice, alcoholism, drugs and despair. But she skillfully draws us along and opens up her life, her family and her communities to show us a way forward. It's the best kind of memoir, clear-eyed, generous and glorious. Bear witness to the emergence of one of the most powerful voices of her generation. And it's Eden Robinson who said that, and she wrote Monkey Beach, which I've read and really enjoyed and want to read more of her books. So again, I think this could be like a book of the year for me. I need to read it. We're on to the last 4, guys, and all of these were sent to me from publishers and I haven't got around to them yet. And this first one, shamefully, was sent to me at the start of the year from Catapult Press. They're an independent publisher based in the US, and I love their catalogue. And this is A Map Is Only One Story, 20 Writers on Immigration, Family and the Meaning of Hope. This is edited by Nicole Chung and Mensa Mary, and I actually started this one, as you can see, just before lockdown, and I read the first 2 essays and I really enjoyed them, and I just stopped reading non-fiction for a lot of lockdown, and then obviously, as I've mentioned, stopped reading physical books. But I definitely want to get back to this one. I think I can get through this one pretty quickly and it sounds brilliant, so I need to read it. These next 2 I've spoken about really recently, so I'll just briefly hold them up. The Museum of Whales You Will Never See, Travels Among the Collectors of Iceland by A. Kendra Green. And Between Light and Storm, How We Live with Other Species by Esther Wolfson, beautifully published. And then this last one arrived in the post in the last couple of weeks, and it's one I had my eye on actually, and it's Our Bodies, Their Battlefield, What War Does to a Woman by Christina Lamb. I think this will be a really hard read as well. Again, I think this is getting really good reviews, and this is from the award-winning war reporter and co-author of I Am Malala. This is the first major account to address the scale of rape and sexual violence in modern conflict. So yeah, I think this is going to be a really horrifying read, but a really important one, and so I definitely want to read that at some point. So those are all my unread non-fiction books. Now, one thing I will say is that I also have some on audio, which I'm not going to mention because there's too many. And I'd also like to start reading more books about British history, because I'm really stupid and I know hardly anything about the history of my own country, which is quite embarrassing. And so I would definitely like to try and pick up Black and British, and I'd also like to try and pick up some books about the life of like working class people through the ages. So I'm going to do some research into that. But again, I don't know if I'll manage all of those in November, but those are things that I feel like is missing from my stack. I'm much better at reading history about other countries than about my own. So yeah. So please, please, please help me. Which ones have you read? Which ones do you want to rave about? Which ones are worth my time? Which ones aren't? And yeah, also which ones are you interested in hearing me talk about? So yeah, thanks so much for watching. And also let me know if you'll be participating in Non-Fiction November and what you're planning on reading, because I always love hearing other people's TBRs as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!